Hey guys, tonight we're going way, way back. So far back, there isn't even a castle to hide in, a plague to avoid, or a suspicious hunk of bread to chew on. We're dropping into the glorious, mud-caked chaos of prehistoric battle. Not the painted faces and mammoth hunts kind you see in documentaries, but the real, unfiltered mess of what actually happened when humans decided, you know what would make this day even better? Throwing rocks at our neighbors. Before we stomp barefoot into the ancient dirt, take a second to like and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy this kind of absurd time travel. If you want, leave a comment telling me what hour of the night it is, where you are, and whether you're hiding from sleep, work, or just your own thoughts. Now, dim the lights, put on a fan, and wedge yourself under whatever covers you trust to keep the monsters out. Get as cozy as a woolly rhino in a snowstorm, because tonight we're diving into the prehistoric battlefield where the only thing more confusing than the weapons is figuring out whose side you're on. And let's be honest, you probably have questions. Like, was there a battle plan or just a lot of screaming? Did anyone ever stop to invent armor? How do you prepare for battle when your most advanced technology is a sharp stick and some rocks you found in your cave? What counts as a war crime when nobody's invented rules yet? Did anyone ever actually win? Or did everyone just run out of rocks? And most importantly, would you even survive long enough to find breakfast? Or would you become part of history's earliest missing persons report, last seen running from a mammoth and tripping over your own feet? Congratulations. You've just woken up somewhere between 10,000 and 2000 BCE. You're barefoot, probably itchy, maybe a little hungry, and you're clutching a club that smells like regret. Someone's shouting in a language nobody's bothered to write down, and it's starting to look like you're expected to join in. Good luck. The sun is rising, and you're already in trouble. There's no alarm clock, just the cold slap of wind and the distant sound of someone yelling about a missing spear. You squint through smoke and morning fog, trying to remember if today is run from predator's day or run toward your enemy's day. Your bed, if you can even call it that, is a patchy mound of animal hides and questionable moss. No memory foam, no weighted blanket, not even a slightly resentful cat sitting on your chest. Instead, you've got a lumpy cushion of grass, two rocks that somehow always end up under your hip, and the faint smell of whatever died nearby last night. Congratulations, you've achieved prehistoric luxury, which mostly means your feet aren't actually frozen to the ground. Waking up in the Stone Age is a group activity. Privacy hasn't been invented yet, so you share your sleeping space with everyone else in your band, family, neighbors, possibly a confused dog-wolf hybrid who hasn't decided if it's a pet or competition for leftovers. There's snoring, there's sneezing, there's the gentle nighttime symphony of someone grinding their teeth against a pine cone. You're lucky if you get 3 hours of uninterrupted sleep before someone starts a fire in the middle of the shelter and smokes everyone out. Forget about waking up gently to birdsong. Your prehistoric alarm clock is an abrupt elbow to the ribs from your cousin, who claims they heard something moving in the grass. Was it a mammoth? Was it a rival clan? Was it just Uncle Thog rolling over and snoring so loud it echoes off the cliffs? Doesn't matter. Adrenaline does the rest. You sit up, hair matted, drool frozen on your cheek, and try to look alert while internally negotiating with your own legs to start functioning. There's no time for snooze buttons. The concept of 5 more minutes is a modern invention. Here, every second you spend lying down is a second you're not eating, not hiding, or not defending your stash of edible roots from that one neighbor who always borrows things and never brings them back. If you fall back asleep, you might wake up to discover someone's used your favorite fur as a toilet or traded it away for a shiny rock. The morning routine is brutal. There's no bathroom, no warm water, no herbal tea to gently coax you into consciousness. Instead, you get to splash your face with freezing river water, which guarantees you're awake, if slightly traumatized. Toothbrushes don't exist, so you do your best with a stick, your finger, or just vigorous denial. If your teeth hurt, the accepted remedy is to complain loudly and chew on a stick until the pain becomes part of your personality. Getting dressed for the day is equally thrilling. You pore through a pile of furs and decide which ones are least likely to attract lice, then do the prehistoric shimmy to wriggle into something resembling clothing. It's a fashion statement best described as whatever's not crawling with beetles. If you're lucky, you'll find a necklace made from animal teeth, which doubles as both a good luck charm and a warning to others that you're not to be trifled with before breakfast. Meanwhile, the rest of your clan is already arguing about who ate the last of the dried berries and whose turn it is to carry the big club. There's tension in the air, a familiar mix of hunger, sleep deprivation, and the knowledge that any day could involve running for your life or, on special occasions, inventing fire safety protocols on the fly. But despite the chaos, there's a certain rugged charm to it all. Waking up without a snooze button means you don't waste any time pretending you have control over your morning. The Stone Age laughs at morning routines. It's a masterclass in improvisation, resilience, and occasionally sprinting. And as the sun finally crests the horizon, you grab your gear, whatever hasn't wandered off during the night, and step out into another day of not knowing whether you're breakfast or the one eating it. No caffeine needed, just raw, unfiltered survival, and a lingering hope you'll still have all your toes by sunset. Welcome to the original morning grind. You start your day with a handful of questionable tubers and the gnawing certainty that half of breakfast is probably poisonous. No coffee, no bread, just calories you hope don't fight back later. You eat fast, because someone's already eyeing your share. The prehistoric breakfast table, if you could call it that, is a circle of cold dirt, some suspicious footprints, and a communal pile of whatever anyone was desperate enough to dig up before sunrise. There's no bowl, no plate, no utensils, just fingers, cracked nails, and the shared understanding that whoever drops their food loses it to the nearest opportunist. The morning meal is a contest in dexterity, optimism, and immune system strength. You look at your spread, which tonight consists of root vegetables that could be carrots or could be prehistoric landmines. There's also something green and leafy, which everyone pretends is edible because last time someone said it wasn't, they just got hungrier. Every now and then, you spot a berry, an actual treat. You immediately shove it in your mouth before anyone else notices, then spend the next 5 minutes hoping it's not the kind that makes you see colors and question your life choices. There are no second helpings in the Stone Age. If you want more, you'd better find it yourself, or wrestle it from the kid next to you, who's already figured out the art of eating with one hand and defending their breakfast with the other. Sharing is technically encouraged, but mostly in the if you don't, we'll fight you for it sense. Every meal is a delicate balance of politeness and survival of the fastest. Forget about variety. Every day is root stew, root mash, or just plain roots with a side of regret. Occasionally, someone brings back a beetle or a handful of ants. There's no shame in protein, even if it's still wiggling. You pop it in your mouth and tell yourself it tastes like chicken. It doesn't. It tastes like crunchy, gritty anxiety. You'd think cooking would help, but fire is unpredictable and precious. Most mornings, the hot part of breakfast is the memory of last night's embers and the faint aroma of something that probably should have been cooked longer. If someone manages to roast a root over the fire, it's a group event. Everyone gathers around, watching hungrily as it sizzles, each person calculating the risk of snatching it versus the certainty of getting singed by the flames or swatted by an angry auntie. Hydration is just as risky. There's no orange juice, no herbal tea, just water from the river or the dew you can lick off a leaf. If you're lucky, it's merely muddy. If you're unlucky, it adds a whole new category of problems to your digestive system. But at least it's not fermented, which is what you call water that sat too long and is now alive in ways you'd rather not discuss. Breakfast conversations are short and to the point. Is this edible? What bit me? And who ate the last root? Dominate the dialogue. There's not much time for gossip when you're busy chewing and scanning the horizon for predators, or that one cousin who always samples everyone's portion. And yet, there's a twisted sense of accomplishment when you finish your prehistoric breakfast without passing out or needing emergency moss. If you can get through a meal without numb lips or hallucinations, you're already ahead of the curve. The worst-case scenario is food poisoning. The best case is you're just as hungry as when you started, but at least you survived the first meal of the day. There's no lingering over your meal, no second cup of coffee while you scroll through cave paintings. Instead, it's straight to work, hunting, gathering, or inventing excuses to avoid both. Your stomach rumbles in protest, but you're used to ignoring it. After all, there's always lunch. Or at least, the promise of something vaguely chewable, if you're lucky enough to find it. So, next time you complain about burnt toast or cold cereal, just remember, somewhere, deep in the foggy annals of human history, your ancestors were starting their day with breakfast roulette, spoiled roots, raw regret, and the eternal hope that tomorrow's menu might just include something that doesn't fight back. Getting dressed for battle is easy. You throw on whatever didn't rot overnight. If you're lucky, you've got a hide, some fur, and maybe a necklace made of bones to look intimidating, or just weirdly enthusiastic about dental hygiene. The prehistoric closet is a feast for the senses, mostly the sense of smell, and not in a good way. The first rule of Stone Age fashion is don't look down. Most mornings, you reach for your favorite mammoth pelt, only to discover something's chewed a hole through it during the night. Is it salvageable? Of course it is. In the prehistoric world, if you can still wrap it around your shoulders and the fleas haven't claimed full ownership, it's basically designer. There's no such thing as matching outfits. Style is a direct result of survival and luck. Today, you're rocking au naturel mudstains, last week's deerskin, which is still slightly damp for reasons no one will ever explain, and a decorative belt made of woven reeds that you hope will hold up under pressure, both physical and social. You've got about 3 options for what to wear. What you wore yesterday, what someone else wore yesterday, or whatever the dog-wolf hybrid dragged in this morning. Accessories are a big deal, mostly because they serve a dual purpose, making you look tough and warning potential enemies that you might be the sort of person who collects teeth for fun. A necklace of animal claws? That's both a statement piece and a subtle way of telling your neighbors, yes, I am willing to wrestle a badger. Some folks go for shell earrings, some prefer feathers, and some just smear themselves with berry juice and call it camouflage. Bonus points if your war paint doesn't attract too many bees. Let's talk footwear. If you have any, they're 2 uneven slabs of rawhide tied around your feet with strips of sinew. Arch support is a distant dream, and right now you're just hoping to avoid stepping on anything that bites back. Half the group goes barefoot, developing calluses so thick you could safely stomp on a pine cone. Sure, your feet are permanently dirty, but on the plus side, no one's invented the open-toed sandal yet, so you don't have to worry about fashion police. Just actual police. With clubs, climate plays a huge role in your look. If it's cold, you pile on every hide you own until you're indistinguishable from a small, anxious bear. If it's hot, you strip down to the bare essentials, literally. Modesty standards haven't really been invented, and the only thing anyone cares about is sunburn, which, without sunscreen, is just a part of life. You slather yourself in mud, which, in addition to being a timeless look, doubles as insect repellent, sunscreen, and a handy excuse for any mysterious odors. There's no washing your clothes, unless drag it through the river and hope the leeches eat the worst of it counts as laundry. Every stain tells a story, and every tear is a badge of honor. If your fur is stiff enough to stand up on its own, that's not a problem, it's structural support. Besides, everyone else smells the same way. Personal hygiene is more of a group suggestion than an actual priority. Fashion isn't just about self-expression, it's tactical. The more intimidating you look, the less likely someone is to throw a rock at your head. Some paint their faces with red clay, others tie sticks in their hair for added height, and at least one person in your group insists that wearing a necklace of snail shells makes arrows bounce off. Nobody argues with them, because anyone who wears live snails to battle probably knows something you don't. And finally, There's the ritual of checking your armor before heading out. Is your hide stiff enough to deflect a sharp stick? Are your bones jangling in a way that says warrior instead of I tripped and fell into a badger den? Is there any part of your outfit that could be used as a makeshift bandage later? You check, adjust, and try to ignore the growing realization that, at the end of the day, prehistoric fashion is mostly about bluffing. You're just hoping to look scary enough to survive until tomorrow's laundry day, whenever that is. So you step out, resplendent in mud, fur, and a necklace of questionable provenance, ready to face whatever the world throws at you, preferably not arrows. But, honestly, you'll take your chances. Arm yourself. The arsenal consists of rocks, sticks, and maybe the odd jawbone. The only upgrade is sharper than yesterday. You wish for armor, but settle for optimism and the hope that your enemies are even clumsier than you. Weapon selection in the prehistoric world is less. Choose your fighter and more. What did I step on this morning that could also be used to bludgeon someone? There are no racks of gleaming swords or legendary axes, just an assortment of objects that falls somewhere between potentially lethal and mildly inconvenient. You scan the ground for inspiration. Is that a rock? Yes, but is it throwable? Flat rocks for throwing, round rocks for bashing, sharp rocks for, well, being pointy. Each has its purpose, but none are exactly the Excalibur of your dreams. Sticks, too, come in a delightful range of varieties. Thick clubs for heavy hitters, thin branches for poking, and the occasional bent stick that everyone insists is special because someone once bonked a wild boar with it. There's fierce debate in the group about which type is best, much like arguing over the best kitchen knife, except the stakes are considerably higher, and no one has invented the word knife yet. You might even find a stick with a stone tied to the end with a strip of hide. This, my friend, is the cutting edge of weapon technology, the hand axe. Congratulations, you're now holding the latest in prehistoric innovation, a stick with ambition. But if you want to make an impression, nothing says don't mess with me like carrying a massive animal jawbone. It's cumbersome, unpredictable, and nearly impossible to aim. But it has the undeniable advantage of scaring anyone who wonders what you had to do to get it. Is it practical? Not really. Does it make you look like you mean business? Absolutely. Plus it doubles as a snack tray if you get hungry mid-battle multitasking prehistoric style. There's no quality control. Every weapon is a custom job, hand-selected from the forest floor, and improved only by repeated, frantic use. If your stick breaks, you get a new stick. If your rock chips, congratulations, it's now a sharp rock. Occasionally, someone tries to invent something fancy, like a spear with two pointy ends, but this mostly results in confusion and accidental injuries. The group's blacksmith is just the guy who can tie things together without them falling apart in the first 5 minutes. Weapon maintenance is as advanced as the weapons themselves. Sharpening a stick? Rub it on a rough rock and hope for the best. Need to reattach a stone? Use sinew, plant fiber, or, in desperate times, spit. You keep a mental tally of how many times your weapon has been improved. But in reality, every upgrade just adds to its list of mysterious stains and possibly communicable diseases. And let's not pretend there's any real training involved. The only tutorial is watching your older sibling hurl a rock and immediately duck when it comes flying back. Aim is a suggestion. More often than not, you hit your own foot, a nearby friend, or, in one infamous incident, the last remaining pot of edible roots. Nobody ever lets you forget that one. In the absence of shields or armor, the main defensive technique is don't get hit. If you're feeling extra tactical, you might grab a big piece of bark and hold it out in front of you, but it's about as effective as fighting with a wet towel. Courage is measured not in strength, but in how convincingly you can bluff your way through the first 5 seconds of combat. Despite the limitations, there's something endearing about it all. Every weapon is personal, a reflection of your resourcefulness, desperation, and willingness to pick up anything not nailed down. You line up with your clan, arsenal in hand, hearts pounding, and hope that today your stick is pointier, your rock is heavier, and your reflexes are just a little bit quicker than the other guys. And as you march to battle, armed with optimism, improvised gear, and a slightly haunted jawbone, you can't help but marvel at human progress. Who needs swords anyway? This rock got you through last week, and with any luck, it'll get you through today too. Nobody's drawing maps or giving stirring speeches. The closest thing to a strategy is make loud noises and hope they run away first. Your team's war council is just a lot of grunting and the occasional accidental slap. Battle planning, in the prehistoric era, is less chess match and more improvisational theatre with blunt objects. There's no general in shining armour, no eagle-eyed scout with a fancy feather hat, and certainly no motivational slogans printed on banners, because banners haven't been invented, and feathers are strictly reserved for ceremonial butt flaps. Instead, the night before, a fight is spent in a sort of communal huddle. Your group gathers around the smoky fire, brandishing rocks, sticks, and someone's unlucky lunch bone. Plans are exchanged with gestures, mimes, and a series of eyebrow movements that may or may not mean flank left or please pass the last beetle. It's possible someone once tried to invent a plan. Maybe there was a brave ancestor who stood up and cleared their throat, only to be immediately trampled by two uncles arguing about who gets the biggest club. Any attempt at organization quickly devolves into chaos. The closest thing you get to a briefing is a wild-eyed elder shouting something vaguely inspirational, then immediately forgetting what they were saying as a rabbit sprints through camp, distracting half your warriors. You try to listen, but the main talking point is always, we run at them, they run at us, and whoever looks scarier wins. That's the sum total of tactical genius for your tribe. Any deviation from this sacred ritual is considered either madness or sorcery. You consider suggesting a fake retreat or some other innovative maneuver, but last time you had an idea, you ended up assigned to distract the enemy by waving a burning stick and screaming. Your eyebrows have only just grown back. Weapons are checked. Morale is ambiguous. Some people are fired up, others are mostly just hungry and hoping the battle wraps up before the last edible roots get snatched. Your elite troops are anyone who hasn't twisted their ankle in the last moon cycle. As the sun rises, the entire group is pressed into service. Elders waving rattles, children hurling insults, and one cousin who insists on playing the jawbone flute for luck. No one is quite sure whether this helps or just attracts more predators. There's no element of surprise. Stealth is impossible when half your group can't stop yelling and the other half is still negotiating whose turn it is to carry the lucky rock. You assemble in a vaguely straight line, or more often, a squiggly, chaotic blob, and lock eyes with the rival clan, who look equally disorganized and are also distracted by one of their dogs chasing its own tail. Then, with a great whoop and a clatter of whatever passes for armor, everyone rushes forward. The plan, if you can call it that, is to be slightly louder, slightly wilder, and slightly more unpredictable than the other side. You channel your inner bear, puff out your chest, and bellow a war cry that's meant to sound terrifying but mostly comes out as a kind of surprised sneeze. The chaos is spectacular. Nobody moves in sync. There's just a lot of running, tripping, and the occasional accidental collision with a tree. Rocks are thrown with admirable enthusiasm and questionable aim. Some people drop their weapons, some pick up new ones mid-fight, and at least one person forgets why they're here and ends up chasing a squirrel. The front line dissolves into a tangle of limbs, mud, and rapidly deteriorating good intentions. If anyone manages to pull off a coordinated maneuver, it's entirely by accident. You look over and see your cousin inventing the concept of flanking by wandering off to tie their sandal. Someone yells retreat, and then immediately changes their mind. By the time dust settles, nobody knows who started it, who finished it, or if there was even a point. Yet somehow, against all odds, things usually work out. One side panics first, someone gets a heroic bruise, and everyone agrees to call it a day. The council regroups and congratulates itself on another brilliant victory. As you limp back to camp, you realize history's greatest battle plans sometimes boil down to the ancient art of winging it, powered by adrenaline, confusion, and sheer prehistoric stubbornness. And in the end, you survived another round of tactical improvisation. No notes needed, just don't forget your club next time. Your battle buddies are whoever didn't wander off overnight. The group includes your cousins, your least favorite neighbor, and someone who keeps trying to invent pants. Morale is complicated. The prehistoric muster call isn't so much a bugle at dawn as it is your aunt yelling into the mist and hoping nobody's fallen into a hole. You shuffle into the growing crowd, rubbing sleep from your eyes and silently calculating which of your relatives will be most useful if things go sideways. It's a delicate calculus, because useful in this context could mean anything from can throw a rock straight to has never mistaken a beehive for a helmet. Roll call is a communal event. There's no neat list, just the clan's loudest member counting heads and toes, sometimes twice, since counting above 5 is mostly theoretical. Anyone missing is assumed to have gone fishing, gotten stuck in a thorn bush, or decided today is the perfect day to move to a rival tribe with better snacks. You look around and notice that, once again, Old Pag is asleep under a pile of animal hides. He's considered part of the team, mostly because he snores loudly enough to scare off scavengers. The social spectrum is broad. On your left is your cousin Grug, who treats every skirmish as an excuse to demonstrate his innovative battle cries, most of which sound suspiciously like hiccups. On your right is your neighbor, who borrowed your only sharp stick 6 moons ago and never gave it back, but still expects you to save him if a wild boar appears. Family loyalty means you probably will, but you'll grumble about it the whole time. Then there's that one guy, no one's sure whose cousin he is, who smells permanently of fermented mushrooms and claims he invented the concept of socks. His main contribution to the cause is confusing everyone, including the enemy, with his passionate monologues about why you should always wear your mammoth pelt inside out for luck. He's never actually fought anything larger than a squirrel, but everyone keeps him around just in case his luck theory finally pays off. Some members are raring to go, strutting around, flexing muscles and making wild promises about how many enemies they'll defeat. Others are quietly regretting yesterday's undercooked roots and would honestly rather face a saber-toothed cat than deal with another round of motivational speeches. A handful are only here because they were promised first dibs on leftovers after the battle, true warriors of opportunity. Armament is a haphazard affair. Someone's got a stick with extra bark on it. Another is wielding what might be the world's first salad fork, and at least one child is using a mud pie as a projectile weapon. The family dog wolf is trotting around, hoping someone drops a piece of jerky or a sense of purpose. There's a last-minute scramble for gear, someone's helmet is missing, again. And one ambitious aunt is tying rabbit pelts around her shins, swearing this will finally prevent shin splints. Team-building activities, as you might imagine, are limited. No trust falls, just trust throws, where you hurl a stone and trust everyone else to duck. Group morale is mostly built on shared complaints about the weather, the food, and that neighbor who can't stop humming before sunrise. You form up in a line, or something vaguely resembling a line, arguing about who stands where, who gets to go first, and who has to carry the communal emergency moss, don't ask. Despite the chaos, there's a weird sense of unity. You might bicker, squabble, and occasionally launch a pine cone at your least favorite sibling. But when danger comes over the hill, everyone snaps into action, or at least into a loose, wobbly formation that could, if you squint, be mistaken for tactical positioning. So you march into prehistoric battle, side by side with your loudest family, your most eccentric friends, and the lingering aroma of fermented mushrooms. Morale isn't perfect, but at least you know exactly who's got your back, mainly because they're standing very, very close and probably eyeing your lucky stick. You smear some mud on your face for luck, or maybe because everyone else is doing it. It's not clear if it scares the enemy or just confuses everyone involved. Either way, you feel 10% more invincible and 100% more itchy. There's something magical about the ritual of slathering dirt across your cheeks at dawn. It's not just for show, at least, that's what everyone says. Deep down, you suspect it started because someone needed an excuse for not washing up in the river. Still, every tribe has its own signature look. Some prefer stripes of clay, others dab on bits of charcoal, and a few go all out, rolling in flower petals or crushed berries until they look less like warriors and more like the world's most enthusiastic salad bar. The main strategy? Stand out, blend in, and maybe trick fate into thinking you're not on the menu today. Mud and ochre swirls across your forehead are meant to symbolize courage, but also conveniently cover up last night's mosquito bites and this morning's accidental porridge splatter. A red handprint across the chest says I am fierce, but mostly says I got bored waiting for the fire to catch. Some people get creative. Your cousin decorates his face with spirals because apparently that makes him dizzy-proof. Your aunt insists on painting her arms blue for protection, though the only thing she's protected so far is her ability to stain every sleeping mat she touches. One ambitious neighbor ties leaves into her hair, hoping the wind will mistake her for a bush and spare her the worst of the flying rocks. Fashion and defense, all in one. And then there's the psychological warfare. You line up on the ridge, faces daubed with mud, feathers sticking out at odd angles, and for a brief, glorious moment, everyone looks genuinely terrifying, or like participants in a very confused children's play. The hope is that your rivals, catching sight of all this chaos, will hesitate. Maybe they'll think you've unlocked secret powers. Maybe they'll just wonder if it's contagious. Either way, hesitation buys time. In a world where weapons are unpredictable and plans are mostly improvised, time is the ultimate luxury. Sometimes, the power of looking weird really works. There are stories, probably exaggerated, definitely retold 100 times, of battles won when one side simply looked so strange that the other decided they had somewhere better to be. You never know if those stories are true, but you keep adding more mud, just in case. One year, someone painted themselves entirely green. The rival clan stared, screamed, and retreated. That warrior still eats for free at every feast. Of course, there are side effects. The itching is real. No one warns you about what happens when the paint dries and starts to flake into your eyes. By midday, half the troops are scratching, sneezing, or distracted by a rogue feather tickling their nose. The mud, once protective, starts sliding off in sweaty stripes, leaving behind awkward patterns that look less like battle marks and more like a failed art project. But in a world without mirrors, confidence is mostly about attitude. If you strut around covered in mud and crushed berries, people will assume you know something they don't. Maybe that's the real power of psychological warfare. Even your own side isn't immune to the effect. Everyone looks at each other, nods with respect, and pretends they're not just one good rainstorm away from washing off their courage. War paint also serves a deeper purpose. It bonds the group. As you gather by the fire, dipping fingers into pots of ochre and smearing symbols on each other's faces, you become a team, not just in body, but in spirit. You laugh at the ridiculousness, dare each other to try new patterns, and for a moment, forget that you're about to charge into chaos armed mostly with hope and a surprisingly sharp stick. So you head out, cheeks streaked, hair wild, confidence at an all-time high. Maybe the mud will bring luck. Maybe it'll just bring more itching. Either way, you look the part, and sometimes looking the part is half the battle. There are no pep rallies, just awkward silences, and the hope that nobody asks you to go first. Someone tries to give a motivational speech and immediately forgets half the words. The minutes before battle are a masterclass in avoidance. Nobody wants to make eye contact. You all shuffle around the campfire, pretending to adjust your fur cloak or rearrange your mud war paint, but mostly you're mentally composing your "I'd rather not" speech. The group's unofficial leader, who yesterday confidently claimed they had the spirit of a saber-toothed cat, is now quietly hyperventilating behind a bush. There's an unspoken agreement that the person with the loudest voice should say something inspiring, but every time they open their mouth, it's just another reminder that public speaking wasn't invented for prehistoric people. One cousin tries, launching into a rousing speech about bravery and victory, only to get halfway through before trailing off with, and, remember not to trip this time? You clap anyway, partly for encouragement and partly to distract from the growing tension. Someone else, usually the one who's never actually been in a fight, decides this is the moment to share advice gleaned from a dream. If you smell onions, that's good luck, they declare, with the confidence of someone who's never encountered an angry neighbor wielding a jawbone. You all nod, as if this is wisdom worth repeating, even though the only onions in camp were eaten last week. Last-minute panic is a group sport. One person suddenly realizes they're missing their lucky rock, which they're convinced is the only thing standing between them and a swift exit from the gene pool. Another frantically asks if it's too late to switch teams. Someone is determined to sharpen their stick for the 4th time in 10 minutes, producing a pile of shavings that could house a family of voles. You consider making a run for it, but you know your mother will notice, and prehistoric mothers are terrifying. A few ambitious souls attempt visualization exercises. Picture the enemy running away, someone says, while half the group instead pictures themselves napping in the sun, far away from all this nonsense. Another suggests deep breathing. But the only deep breath you manage is when you accidentally inhale a gnat. The ancient world has no mindfulness apps, only the soothing sound of collective stomach growling and distant mammoth grunts. Meanwhile, the child warriors are staging mock battles with sticks, giggling and tripping over each other. They don't seem worried in the slightest, which does wonders for morale, until you remember they're also the most likely to run directly at danger just to see what happens. The elders attempt to pass down wisdom, but it mostly boils down to don't get hit and run faster than your cousin. The true motivational force is fear of embarrassment. Nobody wants to be the first to scream or drop their weapon. You give each other sideways glances, silently ranking who's most likely to bolt when things get loud. The consensus is that it's probably you, but as long as someone else goes first, you can claim you were just tactically repositioning. As the final moments tick away, you all gather for a collective grunt, your tribe's equivalent of a huddle and halftime cheer. It's not exactly uplifting, but it does make you feel like you're part of something, even if that something is a loosely organized group of anxious insomniacs with sharp sticks and questionable footwear. You step forward, heart pounding, every instinct telling you this is a terrible idea, but unable to back out now. Someone slaps your back, harder than necessary, and mumbles, "Let's get it over with." You lock eyes with your family and friends, feeling equal parts brave and utterly unprepared. And then, without further ceremony or clarity, you're all off, charging into chaos, fueled by half a pep talk, 3/4 panic, and the absolute certainty that this will be a story you tell your grandkids if you remember any of it at all. Nobody knows who's supposed to start, so someone just yells. Suddenly, it's chaos. The line between attack and tripping over your own club is surprisingly thin. You'd think after all that mud smearing and frantic pep talks, there'd be some clear signal, like a conch shell or a dramatic eagle screech. But this is prehistory. No one's invented coordinated starts, or even basic choreography. So everyone just stands around, shuffling their feet, stealing glances at the other side, and waiting for that unspoken cue that says, "Let's get this over with." That cue always comes from the least expected source. Sometimes it's a cousin who sneezes a little too loudly. Sometimes it's the family dog wolf deciding now is a good time to chase a butterfly directly between the two rival groups. And sometimes it's just nerves. A random, panicked shout, usually by the person least likely to survive a real conflict, echoes across the clearing. Instantly, adrenaline replaces common sense. Everyone springs into action, or something that looks vaguely like action, and the world erupts into the most disorganized melee imaginable. Forget elegant charges or disciplined lines. The initial surge is more like a classroom stampede for free pizza. You lurch forward, half tripping over a tree root, half convinced you're leading the charge, only to realize you're being overtaken by 3 children armed with pine cones and one very enthusiastic grandma swinging a stick. Your best friend veers wildly off course, distracted by a shiny stone, and your neighbor loses a sandal in the first 3 seconds. Welcome to prehistoric battle, where nobody wins style points, but everyone gets new bruises. The shouting doesn't stop after the first yell either. Now it's a full-on chorus, grunts, howls, and high-pitched shrieks blending together in a symphony of confusion. Somewhere, someone is trying to rally the group with a battle cry, but it mostly comes out as a strangled yodel. There are at least 2 people arguing over which direction to run, while another is giving tactical instructions to a squirrel. The chaos is infectious. Rocks start flying, but with accuracy that can only be described as aspirational. Most projectiles land harmlessly in the mud, or bounce off someone's helmet with a thud that will be funny, eventually. Sticks are swung, missed, and occasionally thrown in frustration, prompting a whole new set of arguments about proper stick etiquette. And then there's the footwork. The line between advancing on the enemy and stumbling over your own feet is a blurry one. You try to look fierce, but the next thing you know, you've slipped on a patch of moss and are now intimately acquainted with the earth. Someone else faceplants into a shrub, while another warrior attempts an impressive leap over a log, only to land in a patch of stinging nettles. Victory, it turns out, is as much about not embarrassing yourself as it is about actually defeating the enemy. Somehow, amidst the confusion, a few people manage genuine acts of prehistoric heroism. Your aunt, who swore she'd just watch from the sidelines, accidentally intercepts a flying rock with her forehead and barely flinches. The mushroom-scented neighbor, previously best known for inventing inside-out pants, leads an accidental flanking maneuver after chasing a startled hare around the battlefield. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the worst of the chaos settles into a series of smaller skirmishes, mini-battles within the main battle, each with its own set of improvised rules and confused participants. You find yourself in a standoff with someone you vaguely recognize from last season's berry picking. There's a mutual nod, a half-hearted swing, and then you both agree to wander off in search of something less strenuous, like lunch. Eventually, the yelling turns to heavy breathing and awkward laughter as both sides take stock of the results. Did anyone actually win? It's hard to say. Most people are too busy finding their dropped weapons, dusting off their pride, and comparing bruises. You survive the first shout, the chaos, and the glorious mess that is the prehistoric opening act. Congratulations. You're not sure what you accomplished, but at least you did it loudly. A hail of rocks and sticks fills the air. Accuracy is optional. You duck, you hope, and you try not to get brained by friendly fire. It's less battlefield and more dangerous kindergarten. The opening volley of any prehistoric skirmish is pure, unfiltered chaos. Forget any ideas about coordinated archery or organized spear lines. This is every person for themselves, hurling whatever comes to hand in the vague direction of the enemy and praying that physics will do the rest. Your arsenal? Rocks of varying sizes, sticks with questionable balance, and, if you're really desperate, the occasional clump of dirt or unlucky pine cone. You squint through the dusty morning light and quickly realize that the only thing more dangerous than your enemy's aim is your friend's complete lack of it. The first rock sails wide, landing somewhere near a confused sheep, while the second bounces harmlessly off a tree and nearly takes out your cousin's left ear. You clutch your weapon tightly and weigh your options. Risk joining the fray or strategically position yourself behind the largest person available and hope their skull is thicker than yours. Some people are naturals, or so they claim. The self-appointed throwing champion winds up dramatically, releases with a flourish, and promptly drops their rock on their own foot. Someone else manages a perfect overhand throw that soars majestically, only to land directly at their own feet. If you look closely, you'll see one ambitious child using a slingshot made of vines, which mostly just results in a lot of snapped vines and tangled fingers. In the heat of battle, The main goal is simple. Throw something, anything, and don't stop to ask questions. Accuracy is a distant dream. Most projectiles soar harmlessly over everyone's heads, or hit the ground with a disappointing thud. The occasional lucky shot finds its mark, and the thrower immediately declares themselves a hero, even if the mark was actually a startled bird or the communal lunch pile. Friendly fire is an ever-present hazard. You duck instinctively, not just to avoid enemy rocks, but because your ally's aim is so unpredictable that it's safer to stay low. More than once, you hear the telltale thunk of a stick connecting with someone's back, followed by a yelp and a heated argument over who's supposed to be aiming at whom. In prehistoric times, battle injuries are just as likely to come from your own side as from the enemy. This is the original team-building exercise, with slightly more bruises and a lot more yelling. The sounds are unforgettable. Rocks clack and clatter, sticks whiz through the air, and someone is always shrieking, sometimes from pain, sometimes from triumph, and sometimes because a well-meaning but misguided friend lobbed a mud pie at their head for morale. If you're lucky, you manage to keep your eyes open long enough to dodge the worst of it. If not, well, you can always pretend your new black eye is a badge of honor. Now and then, a projectile lands unexpectedly well, causing a pause in the action as everyone gawks at the miracle. Did you really just hit something on purpose? Is that even allowed? The recipient of the hit looks equally surprised, and for a fleeting second, you almost believe that prehistoric battle could have rules, until someone throws a pine cone at your feet and the chaos resumes. When you run out of things to throw, improvisation takes over. Someone lobs a shoe. Where did they get a shoe? Another launches a handful of moss, and one overzealous participant hurls their lunch, instantly regretting the sacrifice, as a dog wolf dashes in for a mid-battle snack. Eventually, the hailstorm dwindles as ammo runs low and arms grow tired. You take a breath, take stock of your remaining unbruised limbs, and realize you've survived the prehistoric version of dodgeball, where victory is measured not by glory, but by how few rocks you have to pick out of your hair. Projectile mayhem, it turns out, is mostly about luck, reflexes, and not standing anywhere near the person who thinks overhand means launch directly at the sky. When projectiles run out, things get intimate. You're swinging, flailing, and mostly just trying not to hit yourself. Your club is heavy, your target is moving, and your sense of dignity left ages ago. This is prehistoric close-quarters combat, less martial arts and more creative panic. The moment the last rock thuds to the ground and the air clears of flying sticks, everyone hesitates, then collectively decides to charge, howling and waving their improvised weapons like over-caffeinated windmills. What follows can only be described as a group exercise in clumsy enthusiasm. Your club, let's call it a club, though it's really just a stick you found this morning, is at least 3 pounds heavier than it looked in the dawn light. The grip is slick with nervous sweat, and there's a suspicious chunk missing from one end, possibly from last night's dinner or an enthusiastic practice swing that clipped the communal firewood pile. Either way, you're just hoping it holds together for the next 5 minutes. There's no training for this. No fancy footwork, no instructor shouting block left. Just your own instincts and the immediate, pressing need not to be flattened by your neighbor, who is swinging wildly and yelling something that might be encouragement or might be a recipe for roasted beetles. The battlefield quickly becomes a tangle of arms, legs, and panicked grunts. You try to remember which end of the club is the business end, but in the chaos, it's a 50-50 guess. The first swing always misses. That's just a law of nature. Your club glances off the air, you overbalance, and suddenly you're spinning in a circle, blinking as the world wobbles. Across from you, someone else is trying to lift their weapon, only to discover it's stuck in a bush, or worse, attached to another person's club. The resulting tug-of-war is less heroic struggle and more slapstick comedy, complete with mud splatters and unintentional hair-pulling. Meanwhile, the background noise is a mix of yelps, thuds, and the occasional "ow, that was my foot," the truly ambitious try for dramatic overhead swings, but those usually end with the club flying out of their hands, arcing gracefully through the air, and landing in the only puddle within 100 yards. Retrieving it becomes a mini-quest, complete with side-eye from everyone else. Every so often, a real blow lands, sometimes even on purpose. The impact is dull and surprisingly squishy, as prehistoric clothing and thick layers of grime absorb most of the force. There are no clean hits, only a series of accidental taps and wild flailing. In the confusion, you accidentally club your own shin, and for a few moments you are too busy hopping in pain to worry about being attacked. Across the fray, your cousin is attempting to intimidate the opposition by whirling their club over their head, but mostly succeeds in making everyone duck and reconsider their life choices. Some combatants adopt creative tactics, low sweeps aimed at the knees, feints that look suspiciously like just giving up, and, on rare occasions, coordinated attacks, two siblings cornering an enemy, then immediately turning on each other when a particularly nice stick appears. There's no honor among prehistoric warriors, just the unspoken rule that whoever finds the best club gets first pick at dinner. Amid all the chaos, you notice the elders hanging back, offering unhelpful advice like, "Watch your head," and "Try not to die," as if those hadn't occurred to you already. Meanwhile, the smallest children take this as an opportunity to snatch up dropped weapons and invent new games that mostly involve poking each other and running away. Eventually, exhaustion sets in, arms droop, clubs get heavier, and even the loudest warriors start looking for excuses to tactically retreat. By unspoken agreement, everyone stumbles apart, panting and battered but mostly intact. Dignity is nowhere to be found, but at least you're still upright. And as you limp away, you can't help but marvel at the pure, ridiculous mess of prehistoric melee, where victory is decided less by strength or strategy, and more by who manages to stay on their feet, keep hold of their club, and avoid being tripped by a wandering child wielding a stick twice their size. At some point, someone decides this was a terrible idea and bolts. The rest of the group quickly agrees. You discover that prehistoric battles often end with everyone sprinting in different directions, no clear winners, just survivors. Retreat is a deeply underappreciated part of the prehistoric warrior's toolkit. Forget everything you've seen in the movies about heroic last stands and epic showdowns. In reality, the most time-honored tradition on the ancient battlefield is recognizing when you are absolutely, undeniably outmatched, and then running for your life with all the dignity of a startled chicken. There's no shame in a good retreat. It takes a special kind of courage to realize you're holding the world's least effective weapon. A half-chewed stick, a rock that's more decorative than dangerous, or your own sense of misplaced confidence, and decide that maybe, just maybe, today is not the day to become a legend for all the wrong reasons. The first person to bolt is often the bravest, even if history doesn't remember their name, or their face, or where exactly they went, because they're usually halfway up a tree before anyone can ask. Once the spell is broken, the whole group follows suit. There's no organized withdrawal, no formal signal, just a mad scramble as every man, woman, child, and even the dog wolf makes for the nearest cover. It's less of a retreat, and more of a collective epiphany that being somewhere else, anywhere else, is suddenly the smart move. You drop whatever you're carrying, lose a shoe, if you were lucky enough to have one, and sprint. Dignity, like your cousin's lucky stick, is left behind without a second thought. The tactical part of the retreat is open to interpretation. Some people head for the trees, scaling them with the grace of panicked squirrels. Others make for the river, hoping to swim faster than whatever's chasing them. A few choose the classic zigzag and hope for the best strategy, which mostly confuses everyone, including themselves. You realize you haven't run this fast since you accidentally sat on a hornet's nest last spring. Meanwhile, the battle zone itself becomes a collection of abandoned weapons, scattered berry pouches, and one or two warriors pretending they meant to fall over and are just resting strategically. The enemy isn't far behind, but they're usually just as eager to get home. After all, no one wants to stick around for a second round. when there are roots to dig up and stories to exaggerate later. Retreats are noisy affairs. Someone is always yelling every man for themselves or run faster, even as they trip over a tree root. There's a lot of desperate encouragement. You're doing great. Don't look back. Mixed with the less inspirational, that's my fur cloak you're stepping on. At least one family member tries to take charge by suggesting a rendezvous point, but it's usually lost in the chaos, and you end up alone in the bushes, pretending you knew where you were going all along. Eventually you regroup. It might be hours later, or just a few frantic minutes. But slowly, everyone emerges from their hiding spots, covered in mud, bits of leaves, and a new appreciation for the concept of not dying. There's always someone missing a shoe, someone else who swears they were chased by something with more teeth than sense, and at least one person who took the opportunity to grab a snack on the way out. No one talks about why the retreat happened, at least not in any way that resembles the truth. Instead, the story quickly becomes a tale of planned tactical repositioning, and the one who ran first gets recast as a master strategist. Laughter returns, bruises are compared, and the day is considered a success, not because anyone won, but because everyone lived to see another weird, muddy sunrise. So you brush the leaves from your hair, invent a heroic reason for your hasty exit, and prepare for tonight's round of storytelling by the fire. In the Stone Age, running away isn't cowardice, it's just experience, good judgment, and frankly, a family tradition. You made it through, but now you're bleeding from somewhere new. The medicine is a handful of moss and the reassuring words, you'll probably be fine. There are no bandages, just creative swearing. Surviving a prehistoric battle isn't the end of your ordeal. It's just the beginning of the next one, patching yourself up with whatever nature and panic can provide. You sit down on the nearest log, clutching your arm, leg, or some other body part you didn't even know could bleed, and survey the damage. There's mud in your hair, a suspiciously sharp pebble wedged in your palm, and the vague sense that your left ankle is twice the size it was yesterday. Forget about modern first aid. There are no antiseptics, no gauze, no soothing this may sting a little warnings. Instead, the local medical team consists of your grandmother, who's seen everything, and your cousin, who claims to have healing powers ever since he ate that weird mushroom. Their go-to remedies involve pressing a clump of moss to the wound, blowing on it for luck, and declaring the job finished. If you're lucky, the moss is only slightly damp and doesn't come with added wildlife. Pain relief is mostly a group effort. Someone offers you a gnawed root to bite down on, another pats you sympathetically on the head, which somehow hurts more than the actual wound, and everyone takes turns suggesting which ancient spirit you might have offended. Laughter is the best medicine, they say, unless you've bruised your ribs, in which case laughter just becomes a new form of suffering. Swelling? That's just your body gathering strength. Bleeding? It'll stop eventually, or at least slow down enough for you to walk home. If it doesn't, the next step is to wrap the wound in whatever cloth is least filthy. Usually a strip of your own tunic, a bit of animal fur, or in desperate times, yesterday's dinner napkin, which still smells faintly of roasted roots and regret. Disinfectant, in theory, exists in the form of strong alcohol, but since no one's wasting the precious brew on wounds, you're better off just hoping the dirt wasn't too contaminated. The sterilization process is a quick rinse in the river, a nervous glance upstream to make sure nothing recently dead is floating by, and a half-hearted prayer to the spirit of clean water. Congratulations. You're now 90% healed and 10% mud. Fractures and sprains are a whole different saga. If you can walk, you're fine. If you can't, you're carried home with the world's least ergonomic stretcher, usually a stick, a friend's back, or the communal wheelbarrow maneuver, where two people grab your limbs and attempt not to drop you on every rock along the way. Your cousin offers to reset your bones with a reassuring, "This worked on a goat once." You politely decline and decide to heal the prehistoric way, lying very still and hoping for the best. Stitches? Not a thing. If your cut is deep, Someone presses two edges together and hopes they'll stay friends long enough to close up. Scar formation is pretty much guaranteed, and every mark becomes a new story for the campfire, preferably one in which you faced down a wild animal or saved 3 children rather than tripping over your own club. There's no downtime for recovery. As soon as you can limp, hobble, or crawl, you're expected back at chores, hunting, or at least providing comic relief. Sympathy is brief, but enthusiastic. Everyone's got their own bruises and blisters to compare, and the contest for worst injury is a nightly tradition. The winner gets an extra chunk of roasted root and the right to demand foot rubs for a week. But you take pride in your new battle wound. It's proof that you survived. Another badge of honor in the grand, itchy, moss-covered march of prehistoric life. Sure, you may not have access to urgent care, but with luck, laughter, and a healthy dose of denial, you'll live to limp another day. And if you're lucky, you'll even remember how you got that scar. Maybe. If your side loses, there's no shame. Only a brisk jog back to camp, where you try to convince everyone it was all part of the plan. At least you're not the one they're carrying. There's an art to handling defeat in the prehistoric world, and you're about to become a master. No one writes poems about heroic retreats, but the first rule of survival is knowing when to let someone else have the honor of being today's cautionary tale. So you arrive back at camp, breathless, slightly muddy, and already working on your story. Tactical withdrawal, you declare. We're luring them into a false sense of security. You say this with the authority of someone who's been running for several minutes and doesn't want to admit they nearly tripped over their own feet twice on the way back. The rest of your clan is gathered around, pretending not to notice the limp in your step or the distinct lack of trophies. Someone always asks, "Did you win?" As if victory is measured by anything other than who made it home. You nod vaguely and gesture at the horizon, implying there's more to come. The battle's not over, it's just postponed. Defeat, you quickly learn, isn't so much a failure as it is an opportunity for creative retelling. The bravest warriors are the ones who can turn a total rout into an epic adventure by nightfall. You embellish a little. Maybe the enemy had more people, or possibly a woolly rhinoceros on their side. Perhaps you lost your weapon in the river while bravely saving a child. The facts get fuzzier with every retelling, and soon enough, you're being patted on the back for your cunning strategy and quick feet. Physical wounds are easy, pride wounds are trickier. Some people sulk, poking the campfire and avoiding eye contact. Others immediately start prepping for next time, gathering rocks or sharpening sticks that were, frankly, never sharp to begin with. One cousin insists on practicing their intimidation face in a puddle, convinced that a fiercer expression will turn the tide next time. You nod supportively, careful not to mention that their fiercest face mostly looks like they're about to sneeze. There are always those who handle defeat by blaming the weather, the terrain, or that one teammate who was supposed to be watching our left flank, not chasing rabbits. Debriefing sessions are held in low voices, with a healthy dose of finger-pointing and promises to train harder tomorrow. Training in this case means an extra lap around the berry patch and a dramatic speech about teamwork delivered to anyone within earshot, including the squirrels. Food is the universal healer. Nothing soothes the sting of loss like a hearty meal, or at least a communal bowl of roots and whatever was left over from last night's dinner. Even the dog wolf gets a special treat, mainly for not running away faster than the rest of you. As the evening wears on, laughter creeps back into camp. Jokes are made about who fell first, who screamed the loudest, and who nearly clubbed themselves in the face. The only thing better than surviving a prehistoric battle is surviving the humiliation of being seen running away. But here's the secret. In the Stone Age, everyone loses sometimes. There are no trophies for last man standing, only the satisfaction of another day above ground and a fresh story to tell. You realize that losing is really just the beginning of the next legend. Tomorrow, you'll be the one nodding sagely by the fire, sharing wisdom about the virtues of strategic retreat and the fine art of running away with style. So you dust off your bruised ego, check that you still have all your toes, and settle in among your clan. Defeat isn't defeat if you can spin it into a tale of survival, cleverness, and just a dash of prehistoric bravado. After all, the best warriors know when to fight, when to flee, and when to claim they meant to do both all along. Victory means you get first dibs on tonight's roasted mystery meat. It's not much, but it beats eating last. There's a celebratory grunt, and then everyone remembers to check for ticks. Being on the winning side in a prehistoric skirmish is, by all accounts, a modest affair. There's no parade, no crown, and certainly no medal ceremony, unless you count the ceremonial passing around of the least burnt chunk of meat, which is both your trophy and your dinner. The spoils of victory, such as they are, boil down to eating before the kids pick the bones clean, and the elders claim the choicest bits with all the speed of a hungry hawk. Tonight's feast is held around a smoky fire, and by feast you mean a collection of roots, berries, and whatever animal was slow, unlucky, or just didn't notice, a dozen hungry humans sneaking up behind it. The main course is mystery meat. Always mystery meat. It could be rabbit, squirrel, bird, or, on very ambitious days, something that once grunted back when poked. Nobody asks for details. If it doesn't fight back or smell like last week's disaster, it's good enough. The first bites go to the warriors who survived, preferably those with the freshest bruises. You get to gnaw on a leg, or what's left of a leg, while the others look on hopefully, pretending not to notice you examining your portion for extra protein that's still moving. There's pride in eating first, a sense that you've earned your place at the fire. This is your moment to savor food without the background noise of bickering siblings and the low-grade panic that comes with watching the dog-wolf circle closer. But with every victory meal comes a dose of ancient reality. You eat quickly, because everyone else is eyeing your hand, waiting for you to drop a scrap or take too long to chew. Hunger makes everyone jumpy, and one misplaced bite could spark a new round of chaos. Nobody wants to be the person who loses their hard-won dinner to a sneaky cousin or an opportunistic toddler. While you eat, the atmosphere is celebratory, if a little wary. The group exchanges grunts, a few shoulder pats, and the occasional tale of near misses or accidental heroism. Someone tries to sing a victory song, but mostly it's just off-key humming and attempts not to choke on sinew. Stories are shared, but only the good parts. The clever dodge, the lucky throw, the dramatic tumble that miraculously didn't end in broken bones. Any mention of panic, tripping, or tactical retreats is met with laughter and a pointed change of subject. As the meal winds down, so does the adrenaline. The fire pops and crackles, casting long shadows over the battered warriors. Someone always brings up ticks, because nothing ruins a hard-fought meal like finding a stowaway in your hair or, worse, in your dinner. Tick checks are as much a part of the victory ritual as eating, and everyone joins in, part grooming, part making sure nobody has to relive the tick-in-the-ear story from last season. In the quiet that follows, you can almost forget the bruises, the chaos, and the sheer absurdity of fighting over a hunk of meat that would barely qualify as an hors d'oeuvre in modern times. The simple act of eating together, bellies slightly less empty, is as close to glory as it gets. For a brief moment, everyone is content, or at least less hungry than usual. There's comfort in survival, and even more in sharing the win with your tribe. Of course, tomorrow's meals are never guaranteed, and tonight's victory may just be next week's running joke. But for now, you savor every chewy bite, knowing you earned it the old-fashioned way. With nerves, bruises, and the kind of luck that keeps you one step ahead of both your enemies and the family dog. And as you lick the last bit of grease from your fingers, you realize this is as good as it gets in the Stone Age. A full stomach, a warm fire, and a memory to carry into the next day's adventure. You regroup and take attendance. Some are gone, some are just lying very still in the tall grass. You realize most battle casualties are just people who decided to take the long way home. In the prehistoric world, the concept of a head count is optimistic at best. Nobody has a clipboard or a whistle, just a vague idea of who's usually around, and an even vaguer idea of where they last saw them. The first step is to scan the clearing and mentally subtract anyone you actually saw sprinting for the hills when things got dicey. After every skirmish, the Who's Missing ritual is a group activity, mostly because no one wants to be responsible for admitting they accidentally left Grandma behind. Roll call is mostly shouting names into the wind, punctuated by long pauses, uncertain shrugs, and the occasional, "Wait, wasn't he just here?" It's not uncommon for half the clan to have simply wandered off for snacks, a nap, or a little alone time with their thoughts and maybe their bruises. Prehistoric introverts seize the opportunity to disappear. The second things get loud, while the extroverts are busy retelling stories of their heroic stand, which may or may not have involved hiding behind the smallest bush available. Then there are the true experts, the stealth hiders. Some people just want a little peace and quiet after all that shouting and stick-waving, so they perfect the art of blending in with the landscape. You spot a suspiciously lumpy pile of leaves or an oddly camouflaged rock, only to discover it's your cousin, determined to rest his eyes until everyone forgets the whole thing ever happened. There's no shame in hiding. In fact, it's a valuable skill. After all, most prehistoric casualties return just in time for dinner, full of mysterious stories and suspiciously clean fur. Of course, the first round of attendance is never accurate. There's always someone counted twice, usually because they're lying so flat they look like two people, and someone else who's completely forgotten in the rush to check for ticks and leftover snacks. The group's leader, whoever that happens to be today, tries to sound official but ends up settling for a half-hearted, "Well, close enough. Let's move on." When a real absence is noticed, the search party springs into action. Or, more accurately, everyone stands around debating who had the last confirmed sighting, and whether it's actually worth looking right now or if the missing person just wandered off to sulk. It's prehistoric detective work. I saw her by the river. I heard him yelling near the berry bush. Wasn't she the one who tripped over that log and didn't get up? Sometimes, the answer is as simple as following a trail of lost sticks or half-eaten roots. Sometimes, it's waiting until the casualty sheepishly returns, claiming to have scouted the enemy, when in reality, they were napping under a particularly comfortable fern. Nobody's really worried, unless it's the good cook, the only person who knows where the edible mushrooms grow, or the one who can start a fire without half the forest joining in. In that case, the concern is less about survival and more about dinner plans. Still, in the rare event someone's actually missing, the group's response is a blend of real worry and ancient pragmatism. After all, if you made it through the day with only a handful of no-shows, you're doing better than most. Eventually, everyone drifts back in, dirty, hungry, and already working on their excuses. Someone claims to have single-handedly chased away an enemy scout. Another insists they were gathering herbs all along. No one pushes too hard. The line between bravery and hiding is a flexible one, and tomorrow you might need to use it yourself. So, as the sun sets and the fires are lit, you look around at your bruised, disheveled clan, grateful that the only thing you've really lost is a little pride, and maybe a stick or two. In the end, the real victory is making it back at all, even if you had to take the scenic route through the tall grass to get there. If anyone's actually lost, the storytelling begins. Every fallen friend was incredibly brave and definitely hit someone. By next week, there'll be legends, mostly because nobody can remember what actually happened. It turns out, prehistoric mourning is less about tears and more about the immediate need to make things sound less embarrassing than they probably were. Sitting in a circle around the smoky evening fire, the clan gets to work mythologizing the day's events. The facts are fuzzy, but the details grow sharper and more heroic with every retelling. The first rule of prehistoric remembrance: never let reality get in the way of a good story. Maybe your friend tripped over a tree root and rolled downhill into the river, never to be seen again. By the time the tale is told, they heroically flanked the enemy, sacrificed themselves for the clan, and fought off a dozen wild boars with only a pine cone and a fierce glare. Sometimes you suspect the story was started by the missing person themselves, hoping for a warmer welcome when, if they eventually wander back. Even the smallest incidents become epic. A stubbed toe while retreating. Now it's the fateful wound received while leading a courageous counterattack. Losing your only shoe? A sign from the ancestors, marking the chosen one. The more uncertain the memory, the taller the tale. No one's there to fact-check, and everyone prefers the version where things are just a little more dramatic, a little more magical, and a lot less humiliating. It helps, of course, that prehistoric memory is a group activity. There's always someone adding dramatic sound effects, or attempting a reenactment with stick puppets and wild gesturing. The best storytellers can make the most mundane accident sound like a battle with fate itself. A misfired rock becomes the stone that changed the course of the fight. A hastily dug hiding hole is described as an ambush tunnel, cunningly disguised as a nap spot. Laughter and tears mix freely, as nobody can quite remember if they were supposed to mourn, celebrate, or just move on to the next meal. Some tales grow taller with every retelling, passed down from one night to the next. What started as a simple trip and fall becomes, over the weeks and months, a saga about outsmarting wolves, leading heroic charges, and inventing new battle tactics. Like the famous defensive rolling maneuver, better known as tumbling down a hill and screaming. Children listen wide-eyed, vowing to be just as brave, or at least as lucky, when their turn comes. There's something soothing about this ritual. Mourning and memory blur together, taking the sting out of loss and leaving behind a feeling of shared adventure. Everyone who's fallen becomes a part of the clan's story, woven into the group's collective sense of who they are. Some stories get so elaborate that you start to wonder if you too were secretly heroic when you tripped over that log or hid behind that boulder. At the very least, you know someone will make it sound good later. And if, by some miracle, the lost return, muddy, hungry, and a little sheepish, they're welcomed back like living legends. After all, who wouldn't want to share a fire with the person who single-handedly fought off the saber-toothed bear with nothing but their wits and a sharp stick, even if the truth is closer to got lost, found some berries, took a nap? The important thing is not the details, but the story and the comfort that comes from turning every misfortune into a myth. So you gather close, share a bowl of roots, and let the tales grow taller as the fire burns low. Morning becomes memory, memory becomes legend, and everyone sleeps a little easier knowing that, in the Stone Age, even a good disaster can make you unforgettable. Not everyone is on the front lines. Some people are back at camp, rolling their eyes, patching wounds, or inventing excuses to not get involved. The real winners are the ones who stayed out of it. Let's be honest. While you and your buddies are out in the mud, swinging sticks and perfecting your accidental retreat technique, the true masterminds of the prehistoric world are busy keeping everything running back at base camp. The women of the tribe are multitasking before multitasking even has a name, moving seamlessly between battle prep, child wrangling, wound patching, and, of course, offering a constant supply of sarcastic commentary from the sidelines. Some are genuine warriors. There's always at least one aunt who shows up on the battlefield with a look in her eye that says, "I fought a bear once, and the bear lost." She carries a club twice her size and tells stories about chasing off rival clans, wild animals, and, on one memorable occasion, a thunderstorm. If she joins the fight, everyone, friend and foe alike, seriously considers running the other direction. But most are the backbone of camp life, which is, frankly, harder than clubbing the neighbor's cousin. They organize the shelter, maintain the fire, and invent new ways to patch up the wounded using only moss, animal fat, and the unshakable belief that it'll scar nicely. Need a splint? She's already whittled one out of a rib bone. Got a toothache? She's got a secret mix of herbs and the patience to listen to you complain about it for hours. Someone's always boiling up some mysterious root for healing tea, which, to be fair, works about as often as any other prehistoric medicine. Sometimes you get better, sometimes you get sleepy, and sometimes you hallucinate that you've invented socks. While the men are perfecting their aim with rocks, and mostly missing, the women are perfecting the art of practical solutions. Someone has to actually find the edible mushrooms, tell the difference between healing mud and just plain mud, and manage the tribe's only functioning water jug. If a plan needs to be hatched, or unhatched, or quietly abandoned, they're the ones you want on your side. It's common knowledge that the best ideas happen around the cookfire, where alliances are forged and rivalries are settled with side-eye and clever bartering. Who else could turn a forgotten berry stash into a feast or broker piece between two feuding cousins with nothing but a stern look and a handful of roasted roots? Meanwhile, a handful of women have discovered the most important secret of Stone Age life: plausible deniability. There's an art to looking busy just as the fighting breaks out. Some specialize in urgent camp repairs, others really important mushroom gathering, and a select few claim to be watching the children, a job which mostly consists of sitting in the sun and trading gossip. The ability to be useful, but not available for combat, is the ultimate prehistoric power move. You can't be conscripted if you're knee-deep in a bog searching for medicinal leeches, after all. And when the battered warriors stagger home, it's the women who manage the triage. They patch wounds, offer food, and, most importantly, make sure nobody forgets whose idea it was to charge headfirst into a patch of stinging nettles. Dinner is served with a healthy dose of "I told you so," and maybe a few gentle reminders that clubbing each other over the head isn't the only way to solve problems. So while the official battle tales might focus on daring warriors and epic blunders, the real story is what happens back at camp, where survival is a group project, and the women are quietly making sure everyone lives to fight and complain another day. The real winners? The ones who manage to stay out of the chaos entirely, patch up the wounded, and maybe, just maybe, invent the world's first spa day out of hot rocks and leftover berry juice. The battle might be over, but paranoia lingers. You sleep lightly, clutching your club, and wonder if it's safer to camp in a tree or just stay awake until sunrise. Welcome to the prehistoric night shift, a job nobody actually wants but everyone gets stuck with eventually. After a day of chaos, bruises, and mystery meat, the world grows quiet, and you remember that the only thing scarier than a rival clan is whatever is making that rustling sound just outside the circle of firelight. You find yourself inventing new sleep positions: the alert fetal curl, the upside-down club pillow, and the ever-popular "please don't let anything bite me" pose. Tonight's security system is as simple as it gets: a burning stick, a few stacked rocks, and your own ability to jolt awake at the faintest hint of danger. There are no passwords, no locked doors, and certainly no security cameras. The best defense is the world's oldest alarm system, a jumpy cousin who screams at the sight of a rabbit and immediately wakes up the entire camp. You know things are serious when even the dog wolf, usually a snoring pile of fur, lifts its head and listens with pricked ears. Night in the Stone Age is long, cold, and loud in ways you wish it weren't. The fire snaps and pops, the wind moans through the grass. Somewhere in the dark, a bird calls out, sounding suspiciously like a baby wailing or a distant neighbor mocking your battle technique. You clutch your club tighter, eyes darting from shadow to shadow, and do your best to look menacing while wrapped in every scrap of fur you could find. Sleep, when it comes, is shallow and filled with weird dreams, some about chasing mammoths, others about being chased by mammoths, and a few that feature you winning the battle, only to realize your prize is a slightly larger rock to use as a pillow. Every sound is a potential threat. Was that just the wind? Or was it a saber-toothed cat with an appetite for nervous, lightly seasoned humans? Rotation is a theory, not a practice. In theory, everyone takes a turn on watch, sharing the burden equally. In reality, the heaviest sleeper always manages to doze off before it's their turn, and the self-declared light sleeper never actually stays awake past midnight. You try to keep your eyes open, but it's a losing battle. Before you know it, Your head droops, you jerk awake, and for a few disoriented moments, you're convinced you've invented the world's first alarm clock, powered entirely by panic. Some nights, the paranoia is justified. The night watch has to deal with everything from sneaky rival scouts to ambitious raccoons and the occasional half-frozen neighbor who wandered too far from the fire and needs help finding their way back. Every shadow seems to move, and every branch looks like the outline of a hungry predator. But mostly, you're just keeping yourself company in the dark, listening to your own heartbeat and wishing you'd eaten more at dinner. And yet, there's something strangely comforting about this ancient vigil. The silence is shared, the tension familiar. You know you're not the only one awake, and if anything really goes wrong, there's a good chance someone will at least yell loud enough to wake the rest of the clan. Eventually, the sky starts to lighten, the fire burns low, and the worst of your fears slink away with the shadows. You survived another night with nothing but your club, your wits, and a sleep schedule that would terrify a modern doctor. Tomorrow you'll joke about how easy it was, how you never doubted for a second that you'd make it till dawn. But tonight, you learned again the simple joy of sleeping with one eye open, and the knowledge that, in the Stone Age, the most valuable resource is not courage or brute strength. It's the ability to stay awake just a little bit longer than whatever's creeping in the dark. Nobody has invented therapy, so the standard solution is to ignore your problems and chew on something fibrous. If you're lucky, you forget why you were upset by lunchtime. The Stone Age didn't come with self-help books, mindfulness podcasts, or scented candles. Your emotional support animal is just the family dog wolf, who mostly supports you by eating your leftovers and sleeping on your feet when it's cold. There are no soothing "you got this" mantras, just the background hum of people grumbling about sore muscles, sprained egos, and that time someone got their club stuck in a tree and cried about it for days. When the day's adrenaline finally drains away, you're left with the aftertaste of whatever went wrong. Maybe you missed your mark, got hit in the face with a rock thrown by your own cousin, or discovered that your heroic charge was actually just a well-timed trip over a route. Maybe you ran away and nobody noticed. Or maybe you panicked and yelled something embarrassing, now destined to become the punchline at the next communal meal. But in the ancient world, the solution to emotional bruises is the same as the solution to physical ones. Keep moving, keep chewing, keep pretending everything's fine. There's no room for sulking when there are roots to dig up, fires to stoke, and moss to be gathered for the world's worst bedding. The camp simply doesn't slow down, and neither can you. If you do manage to find a quiet spot and sit with your thoughts, you're quickly joined by someone else looking for a break, usually a sibling who starts a game of who can throw a pebble the farthest, or an aunt who sits down and immediately launches into a rant about the younger generation's lack of resilience. The Stone Age doesn't just discourage wallowing, it actively interrupts it. Communal meals help too. There's something deeply comforting about chewing your way through a bowl of boiled roots, surrounded by people who all saw you fall flat on your face earlier and are too polite, or too distracted, to mention it. Food is the great equalizer. Whether you fought bravely or spent the battle hiding behind a bush, everyone ends the day sharing the same smoky, undercooked dinner and swapping exaggerated stories about how much worse it could have been. If you're really struggling, you might seek wisdom from the elders. Their advice usually boils down to get over it, or try not to let it happen again. If you're lucky, they'll share a personal story about the time they accidentally set their own hair on fire or mistook a sleeping bear for a rock. Stone Age wisdom. You're not alone, and most things are less traumatic in hindsight, especially after a good night's sleep, assuming nothing bites you. Children, of course, are the true experts at recovery. They bounce back from everything, turning stubbed toes into epic tales and tears into giggles with astonishing speed. Watch them for a while, and you realize the secret to ancient resilience: a short memory and a willingness to get distracted by something shiny, preferably edible, or best case, both. Nighttime brings its own kind of healing. Sitting by the fire, the clan tells stories, some true, some invented, until laughter fills the air and the sting of defeat or embarrassment fades into the background. You drift off to sleep under the stars, the day's worries gradually replaced by dreams of less eventful tomorrows. So you wake up the next morning, a little sore, maybe still carrying a bruise or two, but lighter in spirit. In the prehistoric world, trauma isn't something you talk through. It's something you walk off, laugh about, and, if you're lucky, forget entirely by the next meal. Shake it off, chew on a root, and keep going. That's ancient wisdom for you. By morning, everyone is acting like nothing happened. The only evidence of yesterday's battle is a few new bruises and a slightly more dramatic limp. The sun rises over the camp, painting everything in soft gold. You'd expect some reflection, maybe a heartfelt group discussion about lessons learned or wounds licked. But in the prehistoric world, denial is not just a river in Egypt, it's a way of life. The morning routine resumes as if yesterday's chaos was just another strange, collective dream. If anyone brings it up at all, it's only to complain about the dew making their fur stiff, not the fact that they almost lost a tooth to an airborne root. Breakfast is served with a side of unspoken agreement. No one's in the mood to revisit who hit whom, who ran away the fastest, or why your cousin now insists that limping is a trend. Instead, everyone quietly inventories their new aches, pokes at a purple bruise or two, and compares silent notes on who came out of the ordeal with the least mud in their hair. You try not to wince as you sit down, and everyone else politely ignores your hiss of pain. That's the rule. Stoic silence. The kids start a race to the river as if nothing ever happened, and the elders shuffle around giving out chores in their usual gruff way, pausing only to note that you seem a bit slower today, with the kind of sly smile that says they noticed, but won't mention why. Occasionally, someone almost slips up. Your neighbor starts to tell a story about the chaos, gets as far as, and then I saw this giant, and abruptly changes course. Berry bush, the biggest I've ever seen. Everyone nods. No one pushes for details. The memory of yesterday's frantic scramble is still too fresh. And anyway, everyone knows the best way to handle embarrassment is to pretend it happened to someone else. It helps that the daily grind resumes with relentless energy. There are roots to dig, tools to repair, gossip to trade, and food to not burn for once. By the time the sun is fully overhead, yesterday's panic is already fading into the background hum of daily life. Someone finds a dropped club in the grass and, with a look of practiced indifference, adds it to the woodpile. Another patches up a torn tunic, muttering about moth damage, rather than that time they got tangled with a wild cousin in the tall grass. Small, silent acknowledgements slip through. Someone hands you a root to chew without being asked, or offers a seat closer to the fire. Your aunt casually asks if your arm feels less bendy today, then immediately switches the topic to clouds. Humor, as always, makes its way in by stealth. A child mimics yesterday's heroic battle cry with a stick and a too large helmet. Everyone laughs, and just like that, the tension dissolves. And then there are the quiet moments. Someone washing blood from their hands in the river. A glance shared over breakfast. A half-smile exchanged while limping in sync. The shared experience becomes part of the unspoken fabric of the group, not something to dwell on, but not quite forgotten either. In a world without journals or hashtags, yesterday's adventure is absorbed into the collective memory and then covered over with the busy work of surviving another day. By nightfall, the story has already changed. The bruises are just proof of hard work, the limp a weather prediction tool, and the only thing anyone wants to discuss is what's for dinner and whether it will rain. That's how you cope in the prehistoric world, by pretending nothing happened, moving on, and quietly hoping that, next time, you'll be the one telling the funniest story, not the one limping the hardest. And so, another day begins, just like all the rest, almost. You try a few rituals to ward off bad luck, mostly involving dancing badly and burning things that smell suspicious. Does it work? Who knows? But it passes the time. In the prehistoric world, science hasn't even been invented yet, so magic and guesswork fill the void. After a rough day of battle, or even an especially aggressive root-digging contest, everyone's a little anxious about what tomorrow might bring. That's when the rituals start. There's no official shaman, just whoever's feeling dramatic and remembers which side of the stick is the lucky end. The first line of defense is always the pre-battle dance. No one knows who started it, or why, but tradition demands that everyone shuffle awkwardly around the fire, waving sticks and chanting nonsense syllables. It's less choreography and more group cardio for the rhythmically challenged. If you trip over your own feet, it means the spirits are testing your resolve. If you trip over someone else's, it means they're cursed, not you. At least, that's the story you stick with. Then there's the burning of protective herbs, a catch-all phrase for anything leafy, green, or vaguely edible that nobody wanted in the stew. Someone tosses a bundle of dried weeds into the fire, producing a cloud of smoke that stings your eyes and makes the dog-wolf sneeze. You hold your breath and hope it's chasing away bad luck, not just attracting every insect within 10 miles. Bonus points. If you can keep a straight face, as your aunt declares, the spirits are pleased, while everyone else coughs dramatically. Superstitions multiply with every generation. Some people paint special symbols on their faces, certain that red stripes will deflect arrows, while blue dots keep away angry ancestors. Others tie feathers into their hair or wear amulets made from anything unusual, bones, pretty rocks, or last season's best beetle shell. You're not sure if these charms actually work, but they make for great conversation starters and lend an air of mystery to anyone brave enough to wear a necklace that rattles every time they move. If something goes wrong, there's always someone ready to blame the lack of proper ritual. Missed your throw? You forgot to spin around 3 times? Twisted your ankle? You should have sung the Lucky Root song. Nothing like hindsight to fuel a fresh batch of helpful advice. It's a group effort to keep track of which rituals are in favor this week and which are officially considered bad luck. The only rule: never admit you're making it up as you go. Cursing your enemies is a particularly creative endeavor. There's a whole subgenre of rituals dedicated to ensuring your rivals wake up with a sore back, or at least stub their toes on the way home. These rituals are equal parts performance and practical joke, drawing stick figures in the dirt, whispering insults to the wind, or hiding rocks in someone else's sleeping spot. Whether or not it works is beside the point. It feels good to imagine your foes struggling with an unusually stubborn patch of nettles tomorrow. Even the most skeptical among you eventually join in. It's easier to pretend you have a little control over fate, especially after a rough day. You might not actually believe that smearing mud on your left elbow brings luck, but you'd rather not risk it. As the fire burns low and the rituals wind down, there's a sense of relief, maybe, just maybe. You've done enough to keep the spirits, the weather, and the neighbors' curses at bay. And so, rituals become a nightly tradition, a way to bond, laugh, and pass the time while you wait for the world to make sense. By the end, you're covered in mud, smelling of burnt weeds, and feeling just superstitious enough to hope that tomorrow will be better. Or at least, that your enemies will trip over something on their way home. In the end, maybe that's all the magic you really need. Wars rarely solve anything. Mostly, they just create new arguments. By sunset, your group is already feuding over whose fault it all was, and whether anyone actually won. If you thought Stone Age politics ended when the last rock was thrown, you've clearly never watched a tribe try to assign blame with nothing but hurt feelings and a handful of bruised egos. As soon as the adrenaline fades, everyone's inner historian emerges, eager to debate the fine details of why things went sideways and, more importantly, whose fault it definitely wasn't. The post-battle analysis begins in the oldest way possible: passive, aggressive, grunting, and awkward silences. Someone claims, loudly, that they clearly said to go left, while someone else maintains they were leading a strategic withdrawal, not running away. Fingers are pointed. The dog-wolf is blamed for starting a stampede, and at least one person brings up a grudge that predates the invention of fire. If you listen closely, you'll notice that every grudge in camp eventually gets blamed on that one disastrous berry-picking trip 3 seasons ago. It doesn't matter how minor the conflict, someone will always feel slighted. Maybe your cousin's mud paint was borrowed without asking. Maybe your neighbor's prized throwing stick was snapped in the heat of battle and now just doesn't have the same feel. Old wounds are reopened with the subtlety of a mammoth in a berry patch, and new ones are created at the speed of gossip. And nothing, absolutely nothing, generates drama like the question, so, who actually won? Nobody can agree. The group splits into rival historians. Team We Won actually insists the enemy retreated first, conveniently forgetting the part where you were halfway up a tree at the time, while Team Let's Be Real points out that nobody found any trophies, and the only loot brought back was an extra tick. There's much debate over whether most dramatic limp counts as a victory, or if it's just a sign that you're allergic to whatever you sat in while hiding. Of course, someone inevitably suggests a peace council. In prehistoric terms, this means a circle of people sulking around the fire, making pointed remarks about better planning next time and listening to those with experience, while the elders try to smooth things over with roots and awkward proverbs. He who throws the first rock should remember where he left his shoes, says the oldest grandmother, and nobody really knows what it means, but everyone nods. Soon, alliances start to shift. Those who were mortal enemies 2 hours ago are now united against the real problem. That guy who keeps singing off-key or the child who started the rumor that the enemy used magic. Conspiracy theories bloom like mushrooms after rain. Did the enemy really have better weapons? Or just shinier hair? Was there a spy in your midst? Or did someone just forget to tie their lucky amulet on tight enough? Grudges aren't limited to the day's battle. The politics of prehistoric life are a tapestry of old slights, family drama, and the ongoing battle over who gets the best sleeping spot by the fire. Resentment about missing berries, accusations of stealing my favorite stick, and disputes over firewood allocation all bubble beneath the surface, ready to resurface whenever the group runs out of fresh arguments. But the most magical part? By the next morning, most of the anger has faded. The feuding parties will pretend nothing happened, quietly trade a root or a piece of fur, and find new things to argue about, like whose turn it is to chase off the raccoons. Ancient politics is the art of selective memory, never forgetting a slight, but always willing to ignore it if there's a more interesting feud brewing. So, as the stars come out and the fire burns low, you watch your clan nurse its grudges and patch up its friendships. In the Stone Age, politics isn't about winning or losing. It's about always having something to complain about, and someone to complain with. And honestly, some things never change. After a day or two, everyone has completely forgotten how bad the last fight was. Someone finds a bigger stick, and the whole cycle threatens to repeat itself. You'd think one round of chaos would be enough to teach the clan a little caution, but this is humanity in its purest form. Stubborn, optimistic, and just a little bit forgetful. Yesterday's bruises are today's badges of honor. And the memory of bruised egos, sprained ankles, and emergency moss has faded beneath the excitement of what if it goes better next time. It always starts the same way. Someone returns from the forest with a new weapon, usually a stick so large it needs its own postal code. Immediately, it becomes the center of attention. The proud owner struts around camp, demonstrating its perfect weight and extra bonk ability. Everyone else tries to act unimpressed, but secretly you're wondering if you could sneak off with it while they're not looking. It doesn't matter that the last improved club snapped in half during its first outing. This time will be different. This time, you're sure you've cracked the code. Discussion about next time creeps into every conversation. The elders swap advice about strategic retreat. Mostly, don't trip this time. The self-appointed tacticians sketch battle plans in the dirt, complete with arrows, circles, and a surprising number of stick-figure casualties. The ambitious ones practice their war cries, refining them from panicked shrieks to slightly more panicked yodels. You try to look busy so you're not picked as the designated rock thrower again. Gear gets an upgrade, or so you tell yourself. Moss is stuffed into tunics for extra protection, animal bones are sharpened to improbable points, and everyone invents some new lucky charm. There's a flurry of feather tying, mud smearing, and last-minute repairs to last week's battered shields. One optimistic soul even tries to fashion a helmet out of a gourd, but mostly just ends up looking like a confused vegetable. Excitement and anxiety build together. The kids, too young to be in real danger, play at battle in the tall grass, inventing rules as they go along. You can't hit me, I have the invisible shield. The adults keep a wary eye on the horizon, practicing their best brave faces while quietly hoping someone else will call the next truce. Even the dog wolf picks up on the tension, alternating between tail-wagging anticipation and hiding under the woodpile. By sundown, the camp is buzzing with energy. Old grudges have been patched up, at least until the next stick-swinging contest. And the shared memory of defeat has morphed into new stories of almost heroism. The campfire is a place for plans and boasts, where every scar becomes a punchline and every near miss gets exaggerated into a lesson for the ages. Of course, as the plans grow bolder, so does the denial about what actually happened last time. The youngest insists they would have fought harder if they hadn't needed to pee, and the elders recall a mythical battle in which nobody got hurt and everyone returned a hero. You nod along, feeling the old, familiar itch for adventure and the even older instinct for self-preservation. Eventually, someone stands up, hefts the new stick, and shouts, "Next time, we'll show them." The crowd cheers, half-heartedly but sincerely. You can already see where this is going. The next conflict is just around the corner, lurking in the grass, waiting for the moment when everyone's convinced they've finally figured out the secret to winning. And so the cycle turns. You sharpen your club, count your bruises, and tell yourself you're ready. Because the truth is, humanity never really learns, not when there's a bigger stick to wave and a new chance to rewrite the story. In the prehistoric world, optimism is the most dangerous weapon of all. Tomorrow, it begins again. You lie awake thinking, maybe next time you'll invent armor, or writing, or at least a better breakfast. But deep down, you know that history is just a series of people making the same mistakes, only with slightly sharper rocks. The night after a prehistoric battle is oddly reflective. You're sore, itchy, and lying on your usual patch of lumpy furs, replaying every moment in your head. You wonder if you could have dodged that stick, or whether your battle cry would have worked better if you'd tried screaming in a lower register. Maybe, just maybe, you should have spent more time practicing your aim, and less time perfecting your intimidation dance. The elders, huddled by the dying fire, are mumbling about the lessons of the day. Someone claims the secret is teamwork, another swears by speed, and one insists it all comes down to luck and a solid breakfast. You half listen, half drift into thoughts of what might actually make life easier for everyone. Couldn't someone invent something more protective than a pelt held together with wishful thinking? Or, better yet, couldn't someone just invent not fighting at all? But innovation is a tricky thing. You imagine yourself wrapping a mammoth hide around your torso, then realize you can't move your arms. You picture a helmet made of rock, but immediately think about the inevitable neck injury. And as for writing? That sounds promising, except you'd have to invent a language. And honestly, it's easier just to draw stick figures in the mud and hope everyone gets the point. Even the smallest comfort seems revolutionary after a day like this. A softer bed, a way to make roots taste less like roots. Maybe a system for dividing mystery meat without it devolving into a contest of who can snatch the most with their elbows. You think about suggesting these ideas in the morning, but by then you know everyone will be back to pretending nothing ever happened, too busy complaining about the cold or chasing after the next big stick to remember last night's insights. Because, let's face it, the big lesson of history, prehistoric or otherwise, is that nobody ever really learns. Your ancestors faced the same problems you did. How to protect your shins, how to keep the peace, how to stop your cousin from stealing your best club. The only difference is the number of teeth in your necklace and the speed with which you can run away. You quietly vow to do better next time, whatever better means in a world where progress is measured in club length and bruise count. But you also know that, when the sun rises, it will be someone else's turn to make the same mistakes. Someone else will pick a fight over a pile of berries or invent a new strategy that lasts just long enough for everyone to get confused. Your job is just to survive, adapt, and find new ways to laugh about the absurdity of it all. As you finally drift off to sleep, you realize that history isn't really about grand lessons or earth-shattering inventions. It's about muddling through, surviving another day, and occasionally getting a little better at avoiding the worst pitfalls. If you're lucky, you'll wake up with one new idea, one new joke, or at least a story that makes everyone else laugh at breakfast. And so the Stone Age rolls on, a never-ending loop of trial and error, loud mistakes and small victories. The world turns, the rocks get sharper, and somehow, through it all, you and your people keep going, proving that the real lesson is this: persistence, stubbornness, and the ability to laugh at yourself are humanity's oldest, sharpest tools. Nothing sends a prehistoric crowd scattering faster than someone dropping a flaming log into the grass mid-battle. Suddenly, half the warriors are waving clubs at the smoke. The other half are inventing the stop, drop, and roll maneuver thousands of years ahead of schedule. It's teamwork, panic, and spontaneous arson all at once. It all starts innocently enough, just a little torch waving for dramatic effect. Someone wants to look intimidating, so they grab the biggest stick from the fire and brandish it like the world's first pyrotechnic display. The enemy is supposed to be terrified, but in reality, they just look confused. Meanwhile, you and your comrades are quickly reminded that, while fire is mankind's best friend, it's also a highly unpredictable frenemy, especially in the hands of someone whose main skill is enthusiasm. One wobble is all it takes. The torch slips, lands squarely in a patch of dry grass, and in the blink of an eye, the Stone Age battlefield is transformed into a live demonstration of why Smokey the Mammoth would have a full-time job if he ever existed. Flames leap, smoke billows, and suddenly, survival isn't about dodging clubs. It's about outrunning the growing ring of fire as it snakes toward your toes. Chaos has never looked so organized. The initial reaction is always denial. It's fine, just a little smoke, quickly followed by panic as the grass ignites with a cheerful whoosh. You try to look like you're handling things, but nobody has a bucket, and the best water-carrying technology is your own cupped hands. Someone yells, "Put it out!" and a dozen people start frantically patting the ground, only succeeding in making the flames bigger and their hands dirtier. A few optimists try to smother the fire with their cloaks, only to discover that animal fur is more flammable than it looks. Others attempt to beat the fire with sticks, which mostly just creates more embers and spreads the chaos. At least one panicked cousin grabs the nearest water skin, only to realize it's filled with fermented berry juice, a sacrifice that results in a purple, sticky, and surprisingly fragrant patch of burned earth. As the smoke thickens, so does the improvisation. Stop, drop, and roll isn't a rule yet, but instinct kicks in, and soon you see warriors flinging themselves to the ground, rolling wildly in the hope of extinguishing sparks or, at the very least, confusing the enemy into thinking you've invented a new dance. It's part safety maneuver, part ancient slapstick, and all spectacle for anyone still standing. Meanwhile, the rival clan is watching from a safe distance, probably wondering whether to charge in, run away, or just start selling tickets. You can't help but notice that, for all the chaos, nobody's fighting anymore. The only thing anyone wants to defeat is the fire, and possibly the embarrassment of being the person who started it. Miraculously, teamwork emerges from the panic. Someone finally remembers to throw dirt on the flames. Others join in. and the line between defense and desperation blurs until everyone is covered in a thin layer of mud, sweat, and regret. When the last wisp of smoke fades, you're left standing in a patch of scorched earth, wide-eyed and exhausted, but mostly intact. There's a quiet moment as everyone catches their breath and surveys the damage. Someone mutters, "Maybe no more flaming clubs next time," and everyone nods a little too quickly. The story of the day will of course be retold with extra flair. By tomorrow, it'll be a tale of cunning and bravery, not accidental arson and premature retreat. In the end, you've learned a valuable lesson about fire safety, panic-driven innovation, and the importance of keeping battle and barbecue very, very separate. And as you limp away, singed but alive, you realize that sometimes the best team-building exercise is simply trying not to burn down your own camp. Before anyone bothered with languages, you tried to intimidate the enemy by yelling things that sounded fierce. Was it a war cry? A complaint about breakfast? Who knows? All that mattered was volume and maybe a dramatic fist wave. No one remembers what was said, but everyone agrees it was probably very offensive. Intimidation, in the Stone Age, is a performance art built on pure noise and wild gesturing. You stand across the clearing from your rivals, chest puffed out, eyes wide, and do your best to look terrifying. The problem? Nobody has actually invented words yet. So what comes out is a primordial jumble of grunts, howls, and some vaguely bird-like screeches. In the heat of the moment, it's hard to tell whether you're scaring the enemy, summoning help, or just giving yourself a sore throat. But that's the magic of the prehistoric shout. Communication hasn't caught up with ambition, so every battle starts with a wall of sound. There are high-pitched yelps for bravado, guttural growls for intimidation, and the occasional musical contribution from someone who's secretly hoping to be remembered as the world's first bard. Sometimes, the line between insult and encouragement is blurry. One moment you're yelling to hype up your team, the next you're shouting at the enemy about their questionable mammoth hide fashion sense. Even though nobody really knows if that's a burn or a compliment, volume is everything. You don't need clever insults or sick burns. You just need to be louder than the other side. The logic is simple. If you sound big and scary, maybe they'll think twice about rushing in your direction. Never mind that half the shouting is just you running out of breath halfway through an AAA and resorting to windmill arms for backup. The bravest warriors aren't always the strongest or the fastest. They're the ones who can yell the longest without passing out. It's not all random, though. Over time, every group develops its own distinct shout. Some clans favor the single booming ooga, while others opt for a rapid-fire ee. Ah! Best delivered with a full-body stomp and a generous spray of spit. The old-timers claim there's meaning behind each sound, but mostly it's about outshouting your enemies and your friends. The annual Who's Loudest contest is a serious affair, judged by which shouter makes the most birds flee the nearby trees. Insults, such as they are, lean heavily on body language. You wave your fists, point dramatically, or invent gestures so confusing that even your own side takes a step back. The more outlandish the movement, the better. Hopping on one foot, slapping your own chest, and, for the boldest among you, executing a perfect somersault into a roar. If you accidentally trip and fall, it still counts, as long as you make a noise on the way down. Sometimes the enemy shouts back. For a glorious few seconds, it's just two crowds trying to out-bellow each other. Nobody really wins, but the psychological warfare is undeniable. If you're lucky, the opposition hesitates, wondering if you're truly dangerous or just incredibly weird. If you're less lucky, you'll realize that your voice cracked mid-yell, and you'll spend the next week enduring gentle mockery at mealtimes. After the battle, nobody remembers what was actually said. The details are fuzzy. Maybe someone started the first joke, or maybe the enemy was just really sensitive about their hair. The only thing that remains is the legend of that epic shouting match. Around the fire, it becomes a story of clever banter and razor-sharp wit, conveniently forgetting that it was all just loud, slightly panicked noises, and a lot of posturing. So you rest your tired voice, flex your arms, and prepare for next time. Because in the world before words, victory goes to the loudest, wildest, and least self-conscious shouter. And if your only legacy is an echoing roar across the valley, well, at least you'll be remembered for making some noise. Halfway through a standoff, someone gets hungry. Suddenly, battle pauses so everyone can dig up roots, chase a squirrel, or chew on last night's leftover mammoth. You can't fight on an empty stomach, but good luck explaining this to the people who just invented hangry. You'd think that the rush of adrenaline, danger, and the prospect of glory would be enough to keep everyone focused. But no, the Stone Age battlefield runs on snacks. The ancient art of war is less clash of titans and more outdoor picnic with extra bruises. As soon as someone's stomach rumbles loud enough to be mistaken for a war drum, priorities shift. The whole operation grinds to a halt, while warriors become foragers and warriors' assistants become amateur chefs. It starts innocently. One person crouches to dig up a root, hoping nobody notices. But someone always does, and soon half the clan is hunting for edible plants, while the other half debates the pros and cons of eating mystery mushrooms. The bravest go after squirrels, which are, as it turns out, faster than anyone who hasn't eaten since sunrise. For every successful catch, there are 3 embarrassing falls, 2 lost sticks, and a lot of empty-handed returns to the group. There's always that one person with leftover mammoth, jealously guarding their stash as if it's gold. They chew with exaggerated slowness, eyes darting between anyone who wanders too close. The rest of you pretend not to care, even as your mouth waters and you try to remember the last time you had a meal that didn't fight back. Every so often, someone offers a trade, half a berry for a lick of mammoth grease, but the negotiations break down faster than the last spear you tried to invent. Ancient lunch breaks are unpredictable affairs. You might sit in a circle, swapping stories and wild berries, or scatter into the bushes for some alone time with a suspiciously crunchy handful of roots. You snack quickly, knowing the peace won't last. The hunger monster is a powerful force. Once fed, everyone remembers they were in the middle of a fight and starts eyeing their clubs with renewed interest. But lunch is also the great equalizer. In this brief window of culinary détente, even the most fearsome warriors transform into siblings squabbling over the last edible leaf. Bragging about your last battle fades in importance compared to finding the juiciest grub or the biggest, least bitter root. The group's self-appointed food expert explains which plants won't make you hallucinate, though their success rate is only slightly better than guessing. Food sharing is both necessity and strategy. You size up your neighbors. Will they trade a sweet root for a handful of nuts? Or are they holding out for something better? The careful balance of trust, greed, and ancient hunger games plays out in microtransactions of half-eaten tubers and stealthily stolen berries. Meanwhile, hangriness, the oldest human emotion, takes over. Arguments flare up over whose turn it is to dig, who gets the good seat on the log, and whether or not chewing loudly is a crime against the clan. Small children are both a blessing and a curse. Their shrieks draw attention to overlooked snacks, but their sticky hands tend to borrow anything left unattended. Eventually, lunch ends not with a signal, but with a slow, collective sigh as bellies fill a little, and spirits rise. A lot. Someone wipes their hands on their fur, someone else burps, and the bravest soul announces, "Back to it." Battle resumes, but now everyone has a slightly better attitude and slightly dirtier hands. In the prehistoric world, lunch isn't just a break, it's a survival tactic, a peace treaty, and sometimes the highlight of the entire day. The logistics may be primitive, but the results are universal. Nobody can conquer the world on an empty stomach. And as you pick another twig from your teeth and grab your club, you realize that, in some ways, not much has changed since. So tonight, as you settle into your clean, quiet bed, soft mattress, fresh sheets, not a single club or wild boar in sight, take a moment to breathe easy and feel grateful for all the little comforts you didn't have to invent yourself. Your ancestors survived days when the biggest worry was whether your breakfast would fight back or if you'd accidentally make eye contact with a saber-toothed tiger while running for your life in last week's animal skins. Because for every prehistoric battle, there was also a prehistoric aftermath. Bruises traded for laughter, wild stories passed down beside smoky fires, and the stubborn, hopeful belief that maybe next time things would be a little less disastrous, or at least funnier in hindsight. Every day was an experiment in survival, and sometimes the greatest victory was simply making it home with all your toes attached and only minor moss-related injuries. Tonight, you don't have to count rocks for weapons, listen for stampeding mammoths, or sleep with one eye open wondering if your cousin is about to steal your only fur blanket. You get to close your eyes in safety, surrounded by warmth, with the comforting hum of your fan instead of the suspicious silence of prehistoric darkness. So maybe whisper a quiet thank you to those ancient humans who paved the way, one awkward, mud-caked, occasionally flaming step at a time. History might be a long parade of mistakes, but it's also proof that people are stubborn, endlessly creative, and a little ridiculous. Sleep well, dream easy, and remember, you're here because someone, somewhere, survived a prehistoric battle, probably by running away faster than anyone else. Good night.